You'd always hated the idea of crawl spaces. The thought of being trapped in a narrow, dark space beneath the floor, surrounded by dirt, cobwebs, and the unknown, was enough to make your skin crawl. But when you bought your new house, a creaky old thing, a fixer-upper, you knew you'd have to deal with it. You didn't think much of it at first. After all, it was just a small space under the house, sealed off with a locked door and a few planks of wood. Hardly worth your concern. But that was before it began. It started with the house settling. You'd hear creaks, low groans as the old structure shifted. At night, especially when the wind picked up, the house seemed to moan and sigh, as if it were alive. But that wasn't unusual. Many old homes did that. You ignored it. There was no reason to think anything strange was going on. That is, until you noticed the smell. It was faint at first, just a strange, musty odor that seemed to come and go. But soon it became unbearable. A rotting, sour stench that lingered in the air, seeping into your clothes, your hair, everything. You couldn't find the source, no matter how much you cleaned or aired the place out. It was always strongest in the hallway, near the door to the crawl space. At night, it was so thick, it almost choked you. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, you'd had enough. You couldn't stand the smell anymore, couldn't keep pretending that it wasn't there. You stood at the door, staring at the old lock, and made a decision. You were going to check it out. After all, what could be lurking in a crawl space? Just a few old pipes, maybe some dust. Nothing that couldn't be dealt with. You grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and made your way to the small wooden door at the end of the hall. The lock was old, rusty. The handle turned with a loud squeak as you pushed it open, the door resisting as though it hadn't been touched in years. A thick, oppressive darkness greeted you on the other side, a black void that seemed to swallow the light of your flashlight. You crouched down and crawled into the space, the musty smell intensifying as you moved. The air was thick, almost humid, making it difficult to breathe. Your flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls, illuminating the packed dirt floor beneath you. As you moved deeper into the crawl space, you noticed something strange. The walls weren't just dirt and stone, like you'd expected. There were strange markings on the walls, scratches, faded symbols, and lines carved deep into the wood. You'd never noticed them before. They seemed old, ancient even. The thought that they might have been here long before you ever stepped foot in the house sent a shiver down your spine. But still, you pressed forward, determined to get to the bottom of this. The further you crawled, the tighter the space became. Your hands scraped against the walls, your knees bruising against the uneven floor. It was clear now that this was no ordinary crawl space. It was a tunnel, a passage that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the house. The air grew colder, the walls tighter, and that damn smell, the one that had been haunting you, grew stronger. And then you heard it. A faint rustling sound, like something shifting in the dark. You froze, your breath catching in your throat. It was subtle at first, so quiet you almost thought it was just the house settling again. But then it came again, closer this time. It was the sound of something moving, something alive. Your heart began to race, the sound growing louder, closer. You spun around, your flashlight beam cutting through the suffocating dark. But there was nothing behind you. Just the damp earth, the stone walls. Nothing. Yet the rustling continued, persistent, like it was following you. Your mind raced. It couldn't be. It was just a rat, or maybe a raccoon. Something that had gotten stuck in the space. but the sound wasn't right. It didn't sound like any animal you'd ever heard before. It was too deliberate, too methodical. You crawled faster, your palms sweaty as you gripped the walls for support. But the further you moved, the more you felt as though the space was closing in around you. The walls seemed to press in, the air growing thicker, harder to breathe. The smell now was overpowering, sickening. The rustling noise was constant now, a near-silent whisper of movement that felt like it was right behind you. And then, just as you thought you couldn't go any further, you saw it. A faint glow in the distance, a light coming from deeper in the crawl space. It wasn't the cold beam of your flashlight. It was something else, something unnatural. A soft, pulsating light, like a heartbeat in the dark. You couldn't see what was causing it, but it was there, and it beckoned you. Against every instinct in your body, you moved toward it. You didn't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the strange compulsion that had begun to overtake you. But your body moved on its own, crawling toward the eerie glow, the rustling sounds getting louder, closer. The glow intensified, and as you neared it, you realized something was wrong. The walls around you had begun to change. The dirt and stone had given way to smooth, polished surfaces, like something man-made. The air was thick with the smell now, so strong it made your eyes water. And the rustling sound, it wasn't coming from behind you anymore. It was all around you, 100 whispers in the dark, moving closer, pressing in from every direction. You turned, scanning the space, but there was nothing. Nothing except the walls, the glow, and the suffocating darkness closing in on you. And then, the whispering began. It wasn't just a sound. It was a voice, 1,000 voices, speaking in a language you didn't understand. It filled your mind, crowded out your thoughts, a cacophony of whispers that seemed to come from every direction. Your heart pounded in your chest, the sound of it echoing in the small space as you pressed yourself against the walls, trying to keep calm, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then, you saw it. The shape that moved in the shadows. It was barely a silhouette, shifting in and out of the light, but it was there. You saw its eyes, glowing faintly, watching you. The thing wasn't human. It wasn't even close to being human. Its shape was indistinct, shifting with the shadows, like it didn't have a solid form. It didn't move like a creature. It slithered, like a liquid shadow, pooling in the space around you. You backed up, your breath quickening, but the thing followed. The whispering voices grew louder, more urgent, more insistent. You could feel it closing in. The thing in the dark, its glowing eyes locked on you. In that moment, you realized with a sickening jolt that you weren't alone. Not in the crawl space, not in the house. It had been watching you, waiting for you. It was always there, always present, and it had never left. And then, you saw something you could never unsee. The walls, the dirt, the stone. They were no longer walls at all. They were faces. Faces, distorted and contorted, pressed against the surface, their mouths open in silent screams. The walls themselves were made of faces, human faces, twisted in pain, desperate to get out. But they couldn't. They were trapped, just like you. And in the center of it all, the thing in the shadows drew closer. Its eyes glowed brighter, and the whispers, now a deafening roar, filled your mind. You screamed, but no sound came out. And just as you thought you might break, just as you thought you might lose your grip on reality entirely, the crawl space began to collapse. The walls, the faces, the whispers, They all disappeared into the dark, leaving only the cold, suffocating silence. You woke up, gasping for air, your heart hammering in your chest. But when you opened your eyes, you weren't in your bed. You were back in the crawl space, the faces still pressed against the walls, the thing in the shadows still watching you. And now, it was your turn to scream.